But Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost ancient advanced civilization, Baalbek has the largest stones that were ever cried in human history. What is the weight of that? 800 metric tons. Deep beneath a ruined temple in West Africa lies a chamber sealed with stones no modern tool can cut. One of those stones is so perfectly smooth that engineers who scanned it said the surface rivals aerospace-grade machining. This site far exceeds the known capabilities of the ancients. Baalbek contains three or what of some of the greatest feats of engineering known to mankind, the largest stone columns ever constructed in all of classical history. But here's the part no one can explain. The chamber's layout predicts celestial alignments that weren't discovered until thousands of years later. Archaeologists thought this site was built by a medieval kingdom until carbon traces from the foundation revealed something impossible. The structure is far older. And what researchers uncovered next doesn't just rewrite African history, it challenges everything we believe about the origins of advanced knowledge, the stones that shouldn't exist. You must grasp how implausible it ought to be before we reveal the construction method. The most massive stone ever moved by contemporary equipment is 340 tons in weight. The stones at Baalbek are 1,500 tons in weight. Furthermore, Baalbek possesses the biggest stones ever mined, stacked, transported, and hoisted, as well as the greatest stone columns in the annals of classical antiquity, millimeter accurate and more than 4 times heavier. Even the world's strongest crane, located in NASA's Vehicle Assembly Building, was unable to move these blocks. Envision yourself attempting to relocate the Statue of Liberty. Picture this: you have to move 5 of them at once. But this is the part that really confuses you. The Romans, who were always boasting about their engineering achievements, didn't record a single word about these enormous stones. Absolutely nothing. Consider that for a second. We are referring to the identical civilization that recorded every detail of their achievements, from the construction of the Colosseum to the aqueducts. Architectural accomplishments were something they delighted in flaunting. However, regarding Baalbek, which they call Heliopolis, none of their records mention the trilithon or these enormous blocks. Curiosity strikes as the lack of a Roman foot imprinted on such stones. These measurements don't show the Roman foot breaking down in any way at Baalbek, which is surprising. The question that arises from this eerie lack of sound is whether these stones were already present when the Romans arrived, or if they were simply built on top of an older foundation. It would be like finding out that a skyscraper was built on top of ancient, mysterious foundations without mentioning who or what made them. Why would the Romans, with all their achievements, have accomplished the most remarkable things more than 2,000 miles apart from Rome? Due to this omission in the record, some outlandish hypotheses have been put forward. According to some scholars, Baalbek actually originated thousands of years before the Romans, at a period when humankind had access to information and skills that have since been wiped out of existence. That is the very reason why Baalbek is more than just an enigma to archaeologists. It is now central to heated discussions about ancient history. This is much more than just missing construction records. We're discussing the idea that this location might conceal information about human capabilities that goes against what we know about the past. No scholar, engineer, or expert has been able to make sense of the megalithic stones at Baalbek in Lebanon. The most eye-catching features are often located at the front of a Roman structure. You approach it from the front, and the largest and most magnificent stones are located there, for reasons that should be readily apparent. Located at the far end of the building from the entrance, these are towards the rear. These enormous stones cast doubt on all our assumptions about ancient building techniques.
However, it is not all. These constructions are too strong for even the most advanced building methods. 3 massive limestone slabs measuring 62 feet in length, 14 feet in height, and 12 feet in width make up what is known as the trilithon. Each one starts at about 800 tons, which is incredible, but it's not the most astounding thing. Big stones like these aren't merely lying around. They're 23 feet in the air, jam-packed so tightly together that not a single particle of dust can escape. Think about stones now, but this time include proof that there were more than just those. 3 incomplete stone blocks which have been left there for generations dwarf the trilithon. The birthstone for a mother-to-be is the first of these. It has a mass of around 1,000 tons. Then there's the 1,200-ton stone of the South, which was found in the 1990s. Even more mind-blowing is the fact that in 2014, researchers unearthed an even larger one, the Forgotten Stone, which is estimated to weigh over 1,500 tons. Fascinating as well are the local legends that surround these stones. A pregnant woman who claimed to know the key to moving these enormous blocks persuaded the villagers to feed her, is the subject of one narrative. The pregnant woman stone was thus named. Another one says that the chopping and transferring of the bodies was done by supernatural creatures like pregnant jinn. Touching the stone of the pregnant woman, according to some locals, can actually make a woman more fertile. The traditional tales that have been passed down through the generations attempt to explain the mysteries of these monuments, even though they may sound fantastical. Like many others, the story of Stone of the Pregnant Woman has left many people perplexed throughout the years. To transport a 557-ton block over level terrain, one researcher estimated that more than 500 persons utilizing advanced machinery would be required. Getting it 23 feet in the air while climbing a hill? Nowadays, engineers think that 40,000 people would be required, greater in number than the populations of the majority of minor urban centers. Then, the most important question becomes, why? If lesser stones had been available, why would ancient builders have opted to use ones that were so enormous? I don't understand what motivated them to try something that even by today's standards seems to be physically impossible. Instead of only testing our assumptions about ancient engineering, the Baalbek megaliths utterly reshaped them. The more we learn from them, the more we wonder about our forebears' actual capabilities.
Researchers have spent more time arguing, theorizing, and losing sleep over the subject of who constructed Baalbek than any other ancient mystery. The answer gets more convoluted as we unearth additional evidence. How do you explain a single stone so massive that modern cranes can't lift it? Who carved it? Who moved it? And why does it look as if it belongs to a civilization far older and far stronger than history admits? And if ancient builders didn't create it, then who did? Giants? Gods? Or something else? Anyone can see why Baalbek has inspired such outlandish ideas throughout the years. Your brain starts to search for reasons that feel as remarkable as what you see when you stare at stones that weigh as much as these stones, precisely fitted with ancient technology. Theories about the supernatural have a long history. According to urban legend, Cain constructed the temple while he was cursed by God and wandered the earth. According to some accounts, Nimrod gave the command to the giants to build it as part of the endeavor to build the Tower of Babel. Speculation circulated that the ancient giants known as Nephilim were actually the architects. Nowadays, though, the most common notion is completely science fiction. These enormous stones could only have been moved and placed by entities with technology much beyond that of humans. According to the old alien theory, many authors like Graham Hancock and Zecharia Sitchin have continued to explore these concepts, speculating on topics such as the Anunnaki, extraterrestrial creatures from Mesopotamian mythology, and long-lost ancient civilizations. Then how can doubters account for Baalbek if these stones are indeed immovable? We can understand why none of their hypotheses work if we compare them to the evidence. Science provides a much-needed reality check at this point. What appears impossible could actually be exceedingly challenging, as archaeologists often point out. When it came to engineering, the Romans were unrivaled. Massive wooden wheels, capstans, pulley systems, and sophisticated cranes were at their disposal. Throughout antiquity, we have evidence of Roman technical achievements that demonstrate their ability to move tremendous loads. The Baalbek stones clearly show signs of human handiwork, such as chisel marks when examined closely. Though it would need tremendous planning and a tremendous quantity of work, experimental archaeologists have demonstrated that it is not impossible for humans to recreate ancient building techniques. Skeptics maintain that these theories fail to address the most pressing concerns, such as how the largest stones appeared to surpass the recognized capabilities of Roman equipment, therefore leading to further conjecture.
Consequently, why are these remarkable notions still around? Perhaps this is due to the fact that mundane explanations fail to stimulate our imagination to the same degree as spectacular ones. People tend to look to the supernatural for answers when they can't come up with creative ideas about what's genuinely conceivable. According to philosopher Daniel Dennett, because it teeters so precariously on the edge of verifiable reality and alluring myth, Baalbek never fails to enthrall. Exactly who had it built and how it was organized are mysteries shrouded in antiquity. People are free to place their own thoughts and stories onto that beautiful blank canvas that is created by that stillness. Some consider it proof of technologically superior, long-vanished civilizations. Some see it as evidence of communication with aliens. To the scientific community, it stands as evidence of the remarkable engineering skills that humans possess and the mysteries surrounding them. Perhaps it is in this aspect that Baalbek truly enchants. Big rocks and old building methods aren't the only things involved. It's the power of a single archaeological site to both shatter our preconceived notions of the past and ignite our most fantastical ideas about the future. Whether constructed by clever humans or some other unexplained power, Baalbek is undeniably one of the greatest feats of human ingenuity. Regardless of your perspective, that is truly remarkable. How did ancient builders move a 1,000-ton block with no steel, no engines, and no technology? And why does no historical record explain the one thing we most need to know? How they did the impossible. Blueprints carved in stone, the evidence that changes everything. Everything changed when archaeologists were finally granted permission to dig deep at Baalbek. The presence of cuneiform writing on pottery indicates that humans were present in this area long before the Romans arrived. Temple flooring adorned with intricately carved stone plans, and most astonishing of all, methods of construction that achieve an unimaginably high degree of perfection when matching Jerusalem buildings. Over a century of serious scientific study has been discreetly revealing Baalbek's true secrets, while everyone else has been arguing about the shifting of the stones. What the researchers have discovered is fascinating beyond words. In 1898, German Kaiser Wilhelm II visited the site, marking the beginning of the contemporary scientific narrative. Archaeological digs of significant scale began during his visit and continued until 1904. An imperial curiosity blossomed into revolutionary inquiry that began to rewrite the entire history of Baalbek. More questions than answers arose with each new layer they found. Finding evidence of human presence at Baalbek dating back to the Neolithic period during the cleaning of the Temple of Jupiter was the most stunning revelation. People may have lived here as long as 10,000 years ago, long before it was considered historically important. The significance of Baalbek goes much beyond the Roman conquest, if people lived there 10,000 years ago. Furthermore, the enormous trilithon and other megaliths had already been laid before the Roman conquest. The Romans remained silent as a result. The Romans would have been foolish not to record their origins if they had any idea what they were doing. Furthermore, the idea that a long-gone civilization could have managed such advanced engineering persists. The engineering mystery remains unsolved even after learning that the building predates Roman colonization. To the contrary, it provides further proof that a pre-Roman culture possessed engineering techniques that are now unknown to modern people. On the other hand, in 2004, a significant cooperation initiative was launched by Lebanese University and the German Archaeological Institute to chronicle those ancient unexplained quarries. This discovery could lead to more explanations. Their discovery blew everyone's minds. Artifacts of Persian pottery with cuneiform inscriptions from the 6th and 4th centuries BCE
were found. Were the Persians the ones responsible for these enormous buildings? The Persian pottery is a significant piece of evidence, but the Neolithic artifacts establish that the settlement dates back at least 10 millennia. The fact that it was already present when the Romans arrived further supports the idea that the areas had been occupied continuously up until then. The question of whether the Persians were always the first settlers, and by extension the carvers of the monoliths, is thus further complicated. In addition to their mechanical prowess, the Persians have the organizational skills necessary to construct astonishing buildings. They are a good theoretical fit for the megalith builders, since they can manage megalithic projects. Also, the Persian Empire is well known for its enormous building undertakings, such as Persepolis. In contrast to the monoliths at Baalbek, the Persian buildings at Persepolis and elsewhere pale in comparison. For instance, the building blocks at Persepolis range in weight from 1 to 20 tons, whereas the blocks at Baalbek are more than 100 times heavier. Additionally, the methods are distinct. In contrast to the Baalbek builders who preferred bigger blocks, the Persepolis architects would split huge boulders into smaller shapes as they worked. The Persians also have no documentation attesting to the fact that they were responsible for constructing the Baalbek stones. They too remained mute on the building, just like the Romans. Given the Persians' lack of interest in or adherence to historical documentation, it's easy to see why. Maybe they did construct Baalbek, but their sloppy documentation caused them to be disappointed. Another problem, though, arises. The Persians could never prove they could move stones even slightly larger than Baalbek scale. The Persians were master builders in general, but the megalithic architecture at Baalbek stands head and shoulders above their other works. If they could have done it anywhere else, we would have witnessed it. The presence of pottery fragments bearing cuneiform writing provides conclusive evidence of their presence. However, the megaliths appear to be too much of an engineering challenge for their current skills. To be honest, I was even more surprised by that. By analyzing the actual cutting techniques used for these enormous stones, German researcher Marguerite Venice uncovered yet another important detail. She was astounded by the ancient builders' remarkable intelligence. Using the cracks and fissures that exist naturally in the granite, they sliced the megaliths. This method greatly simplified the process of removing massive blocks without causing any damage. Interestingly, this technique appears in other Roman undertakings as well, such as the world-renowned Pont d'Arc aqueduct in France. Thus, it is evident that the Romans possessed this method as part of their technical arsenal. As our understanding of Baalbek deepens via scientific inquiry, more and more mysteries appear to surface. Every new finding not only expands our understanding of this remarkable location, but also challenges our preconceived notions. The real Roman plans etched into the land itself are something very few people ever hear about. So let's talk about it. Now, this is not a collection of faded papyrus drawings. The stone floors have architectural designs carved into them. The initial records of these remarkable discoveries were made during German excavations that took place from 1900 to 1904. The most remarkable find was a precise plan etched into the enormous courtyard's floor. Rather than a scribble, this was an exact floor plan of a section of the hexagonal courtyard, drawn to a remarkable scale of approximately 1 to 12 to 6. Consider the implications of this. This wasn't a group of competent workers simply assembling stones. Prior to laying a single brick, these architects meticulously measured and computed every angle, axis, and other architectural component. Were these engravings meant to serve as blueprints for builders? On the other hand, were they more like architectural pride badges, meant to showcase the architect's extraordinary skill? Upon further examination of Podium 1, the base for the 6 enormous columns that continue to stand tall today, the most startling link became apparent. Something utterly shocking was discovered when they examined the building methods. Podium 1's design and construction were almost indistinguishable from those of the Herodian buildings in Jerusalem. These matched perfectly. The layout of the two websites was identical, with headers and stretchers rotating. The drafted margin stonework was the same on both. The mean course height was also 3.6 feet, which was identical. There must be a pattern there. It's not a coincidence.
This points to the possibility of Herodian builders' hands-on engagement at Baalbek, or at least the existence of common building practices between ancient locations. From Kaiser Wilhelm's first visit to these recent findings, our understanding of Baalbek has grown deep and intricate. What secret did they believe was buried in its foundations? And why did rulers who destroyed entire cities choose instead to build around these stones as if afraid to touch them? A mountain of stone that outlived empires. One of the greatest archaeological gifts to mankind, Baalbek was designated a World Heritage Site in 1984 by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. However, Baalbek had already captivated the globe before. Baalbek has been a part of human history for more than 11,000 years. Yes, 11,000 years. When the Egyptians were contemplating how to construct the pyramids, it was already standing. From what we can tell from archaeology, this hilltop was inhabited as early as 9,000 BCE. Upon further reflection, that is quite astounding. The tale of how different civilizations built upon the same Holy Land is told by the items unearthed during excavations, which include Chalcolithic pottery, Bronze Age relics, and architectural pieces. As a hamlet, the first people settled on the hilltop. A full 3 millennia later, the Romans still performed the same thing. They set up their altar on top of the hill. Everyone there understood what a unique place this was. I find the name of the site as intriguing as everything else about it. The name Baalbek is thought by scholars to have originated from Baal Nebuk, meaning Lord of the Source. The presence of a natural spring in the area suggests that the hilltop was revered as a source of fertility and abundance by the indigenous inhabitants of the area. Under Phoenician rule, Baalbek underwent a remarkable transformation around 3200 BCE. They erected an enormous temple complex in honor of their deities Astarte and Baal, the sky deity, who most likely bestowed the city's name. Beneath the subsequent Roman temple dedicated to Jupiter, you can still make out the outline of this Phoenician sanctuary. Baalbek became a holy site for the Phoenicians. The ancient god of fertility, Baal-Hadad, and the goddess of love and motherhood, Atargatis, were worshipped by people from all across the ancient globe. However, things start to get intriguing at this point. The Trilithon and the other huge blocks that make up the Western Wall are believed by many scholars to have originated during the Phoenician period rather than the Roman era. This suggests that we may be dealing with engineering that was carried out 5,000 years ago and required the careful placement of stones weighing hundreds of tons. Our current level of comprehension is hardly adequate, given our reliance on human power, rudimentary tools, and processes. How on earth did they pull it off? The real question is, how in the world did they even think of something so daring? What motivated ancient humans to set out on building endeavors that defy our contemporary notions of what is physically feasible? Alexander the Great renamed Baalbek Heliopolis, meaning City of the Sun, after his conquest of the area in 334 BCE. The conquest by the Romans, however, marked the true change.
Beginning in 64 BCE, we have Pompey the Great. After that, in 47 BCE, Julius Caesar officially established it as a Roman colony. However, the most audacious building project that the ancient world had ever witnessed was initiated by Emperor Augustus around 16 BCE. It is worth noting that the Romans refrained from razing their entire city and starting over. Rather, they created a potent hybrid god known as Jupiter Baal by merging their god Jupiter with the local deity Baal. It felt like an old-fashioned architectural kind of cultural diplomacy. The construction schedule is really mind-boggling. Emperor Nero persisted in constructing the enormous Jupiter shrine. Antonius Pius, the emperor, destroyed the Bacchus temple. In the 3rd century, the Severan dynasty finished the entire complex by constructing the Venus temple. At its highest point, the plaza was filled with thousands of pilgrims. The marble surfaces shimmered in the sunlight, and the columns reached towards the sky. Being there would have made anyone feel like they were at the very center of all that was holy. Later on, though, Christianity shifted the focus. Building ceased in the early 3rd century CE when Emperor Constantine converted. Theodosius, the emperor, went much farther. He turned the temples into Christian churches after destroying pagan sculptures and altars. A chapel was formed from the former Venus temple. A church was built on top of the hexagonal courtyard. Shipped all the way to Constantinople to adorn the Hagia Sophia were 8 enormous columns that Emperor Justinian had commandeered from the Temple of Jupiter. One of the most spectacular churches ever constructed would have used these stones, as they were desired by an emperor. The site underwent yet another transformation in 637 CE, when Muslim forces captured Baalbek. At this point in time, the temples were transformed into a kalat, or castle. That's why you'll still hear the locals refer to it as Kalat Baalbek. A lasting impression was made by each succeeding dynasty throughout the years: the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Fatimids, and the Ayyubids, who laid new foundations, rebuilt walls, and added towers. The current state of affairs is like a layered cake made of historical events. There is evidence of every culture that has ever set foot here. However, researchers can't escape this one problem. How did those incredibly heavy foundation stones get there? Who were the first to do it? For thousands of years, gods, emperors, and conquerors would have graced this hill.
Whoever decided that would have been the first. However, a thorough examination is warranted for any significant enigma. Therefore, the major question that everyone is seeking an answer to is actually rather simple. How were stones weighing more than 1,000 tons transported by ancient people? Some of the hypotheses put forth by researchers are just as perplexing as the mystery itself. Others are completely out of this world. First, we'll look at the most basic theory: the use of wooden rollers and ramps. It makes sense when you hear it spoken aloud. For less resistance, you can set these monster stones on cylindrical logs made of wood, and then you can just push or pull them as you go. Just basic physics, isn't it? No, the quantity. It was a total bust when archaeologists attempted to put this idea to the test in the actual world. In contrast to Baalbek's gigantic stones, the renowned archaeologist Richard Atkinson tried to relocate a single duplicate Stonehenge bluestone. As soon as they began to move it uphill, it started to slide sides uncontrollably. While transferring a duplicate statue for another experiment, it abruptly lost its balance, fell off the rollers, and shattered into pieces. Now imagine attempting this over nearly a mile of rugged, uneven terrain with stones that are literally hundreds of times heavier. So the focus of the investigation shifted to the Roman engineering genius theory, which appeared to offer a more plausible alternative. The Romans were master builders, that much is true. They developed crane technologies that were a solid 100 years ahead of schedule. The traspastos, their rudimentary model, relied on a winch, rope, and 3 pulleys for its operation. Pentapastos, which had 5 pulleys, were the next step in their progression. Their heavy-duty machine, however, was the polypastos, which required just 4 individuals, 4 masts, and 15 pulleys in order to raise 2.2 tons. They were already capable of handling up to 4.4 tons before they included the tread wheels. Massive wooden lifting towers propelled by groups of humans and animals using a capstan were constructed by the Romans for the most monumental tasks. Scholars in the present era have for far too long grossly misjudged ancient workers, writing them off as essentially unskilled laborers. Yet that is incorrect. Engineers and problem solvers, these folks were geniuses. In ancient Egyptian art, we see 172 men using their combined strength and coordination to lift a gigantic statue.
You can tell these weren't cavemen scrounging around with rocks when you see how well they worked together and planned ahead. Baalbek remains unparalleled even when all credit is given to ancient artisans. Carrying a block weighing 800 to 1,000 tons isn't the same as pulling a statue, only bigger. We're referring to an entirely new type of difficulty here. The German Archaeological Institute's Margaret Vanish proposed that capstans driven by humans would shed light on the transportation of the Baalbek stones. It seems like a good theory. However, the calculations entirely fail at this point. A load of 6 tons was too heavy for even the most sophisticated Roman cranes. How about 6 tons? There were stones in Baalbek that were 800 to 1,000 tons in weight, more than 100 times heavier than their most advanced machinery could manage with the Baalbek stones. This leaves us with this astounding riddle. How did they manage it when using wooden rollers was obviously not going to work and the Romans' most advanced machinery was woefully insufficient? We continue to be perplexed after centuries of study, innumerable experiments, and passionate scholarly arguments. In the end, no one explanation has been able to put the puzzle pieces together. The enormous stones were simply too heavy for the Roman lifting technology that was known to them at the time. Looking up at those impossibly tall columns and stone blocks at Baalbek now makes you feel like you're staring at something that is stubbornly holding on to all its secrets. Unraveling the secrets of ancient civilization's true capabilities is an ongoing enigma. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button. And if deep dives into hidden history fascinate you, there are plenty more mysteries waiting. Hit subscribe and we'll explore the next one together. See you in the next video.